Welcome to this episode of Unscripted, an IICRC video production. Today, we're diving into an essential yet often overlooked topic in the world of water damage restoration: the importance of identifying the categories of water damages, the type of water that professionals are dealing with. We're joined by top experts who teach IICRC certification classes to shed light on the three distinct categories of water, the health and safety risks they pose, and why proper classification is vital for effective remediation. You'll learn when it's time for homeowners to call a professional, the critical precautions restoration experts must take, and how certification and the right tools from the IICRC can lead to better outcomes for everyone involved. So it's my pleasure to welcome our panel of experts today. Thank you all for joining us to share this important information. Share with us your name, what you do, and set yourself up as one of our expert panelists. Sandy Bowles, we'll start with you. Ladies first.
Yeah, my name is Sandy Bowles. I am president and CEO of Horizon Educational Seminars, which is DBA off a division of Horizon Consultants. I've been in the restoration business industry for over 40 years. Been a consultant for 35 years. Been an IICRC instructor for 28 years. So during that time, I've served as the chair of the fire committee, the technical advisory committee for IICRC for 16 years. Decided that was enough time. I turned over the baton to somebody else so they could have that same privilege.
Jeremy, I go way back with Sandy. Sandy doesn't remember a phone call she helped me with in 1980 something, but Jeremy, you and I
We
go
were
back a
just
ways too.
kids.
Jeremy, tell us about what you do and what you do for the industry.
I've been in this industry all my life. My parents started our company in 1970, so that was before I was born, fortunately. And so born and raised in it. Did my first water damage December 24th, 1988. I remember that job. It was awesome. Really sparked my love for water restoration. And so today we still have our water restoration company, and my brothers and I have the privilege of working that together, and my sister Megan. And it's fantastic. I always worked with my family. But Dad always really was very interested in making sure we had good education. He was a three-digit ICRC certification, so that it was way back in the 80s that he started that, and same for myself. And so to be able to have that opportunity to help other people, I think that's our goal. Is just to share what we've learned through the years. And when we start our classes, I tell folks, you know what? We want to help you do two things. Yes, we want to help you get your certification. We want to help you turn this into a career, and that's absolutely possible.
So, John, let's go to you next. We've met briefly in the past, but tell us about yourself and what you do.
John Perella. I'm probably the newbie on the panel here. I've been in restoration for 10 years. Recently became an instructor, so an instructor for 1 year. I do have my triple master. And similar to what Jeremy said, I love the restoration industry. It's been awesome. I love to learn all the things, and now I'm over on the training side with Restoration Technical Institute, also Lever 360. We merged Restoration Technical Institute and iRestore, so that's Lever 360. So if you see that, but really just my passion for training and teaching people how to create a career out of restoration.
And we've set you up as a panel of experts. We want to get some information to help those who are watching with their work. Many are familiar with today's topic. Many have taken classes, but we can definitely hone in on some things they need to know. John, I'm going to start with you on this one. Kind of an easy question in a way. Can you describe the categories of water and why this is an important topic today that we're going to get into?
Sure. So there's three categories of water. And a category of water is the level of contamination in the water. So category 1 meaning does not pose risk to occupants or people. Category 2 can has the potential for significant harm, and then category 3 is grossly contaminated. It's important because it really sets the premise for how we do the job. We should be determining the category initially before we do any work, so that we know what PPE we need. Do we need to protect the occupants of the structure or the building? We need to protect our employees, and how do we get paid for it, right? It can drastically affect how we get paid.
Good information. Jeremy, when you teach your classes, this has to be a big topic. Do you start with it, or what kind of content do you share with your students?
Yeah, I think that's module 7, so it's fairly early in the class. Is it important? Absolutely. And John was right on when he was talking about those categories. I'll tell you one thing. This is the S500 standard. The categories are constructed by IICRC. So this contains everything you need to know that's actually factual about category. I will say where most people err is worrying about exactly which category it is sometimes. I know that sounds crazy to say that, but some people say, oh, it could be Cat 2, it could be Cat 3, it could be, I don't know, it's one or the other. What we want to focus on is that just categorization is not really the most important thing. It is important, but it's important for what it does next. It's helping you to understand, how do we protect ourselves? Again, John mentioned that, and how we clean that building. So then you go back into section 12.3 in the S500, and you can follow now that pattern that leads you from contaminated to clean. Interestingly, category 2 and category 3, very, very similar. And you might be surprised that we get hung up on, oh, it could be 2, it could be 3, but then when we get over to the process, it's very similar. Sometimes, and I think I would recommend that to restorers, where you do get into this subjective, trying to make a decision, go and look at the processes, and sometimes that'll help you to know which category it should be, because it's like, well, obviously, we would have to, whatever the steps may be, like remove the carpet. Okay, so then you're kind of pushing it towards a category 3 or something. So again, the goal is get us back to category 1.
So Sandy, that book that Jeremy talked about, he held up. Have you heard of that book?
Yeah, I refer to it as the building code for the restoration industry.
So Sandy, let's go to you. Share any thoughts you'd like to add to Jeremy and John, but I know you as well have a comment or two about the inaccurate assessment of water damage, and maybe kind of a horror story to share.
The categories many times are so subjective. And when we, in my class, we talk about a lot of scenarios. What category would you place this? What category would you place that, and why? Give me the reason that you're placing this in this category or that category, because we've got to be able to back ourselves up if we get challenged. And that's where the problem goes, because the definition, for instance, of category 2 contains a significant degree of contamination, has the potential to cause discomfort or illness if dermal contact or ingestion. And I give the example of homes where they've got 3 kids and 2 or 3 dogs running around. And if that carpet was inundated with water, and you could pick it up and pour that water off, if you ingested that, would that have a potential to cause extreme sickness, discomfort? You bet. And yet we don't view that as Cat 2. We view that as a Cat 1. How? So sometimes the definition can be very subjective. When it comes, one of the things that I learned early on probably before Jeremy was born. There were no women doing what I was doing. And I had the wonderful fortune of meeting an insurance adjuster from Auto Owners Insurance Company. And I'm sure he's long gone by now, but his name was Bob Grant. And he kind of took me under his wing. And one of the things that he said to me, he said, honey, that was in the days when you could say honey and it was a term of endearment, you know. He said, honey, anytime you do a job for me, and this was long before IICRC, anytime you do a job for me, if you are struggling as to, do I need to do this, or is it okay if I don't do this? I would much rather you do more than what you have to do than less than what you should have done. And I have held that. That's been my mantra the whole time I've been in business. So if I'm thinking, is it okay if I not do that? Then that means no, because the very fact that I'm thinking it probably needs to be done, it doesn't hurt anybody to do more than what we need to do. And so as far as the categories are concerned, there's some things that are cut and dried. This is a category 1, this is a category 3. But where the category 2 comes in, that's where there's a lot of play. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but that's where it becomes subjective. Jeff mentioned about a story that I have. This happened about 15 years ago, I think, 10, 15 years ago. There was a large sewage loss. A whole row of houses got inundated. It was in Dalton, Georgia, and everything's built on a hill in Dalton, right? And so this row of houses was right behind what we called Restaurant Alley, which was the main drag in Dalton. And there was probably 6-7 inches of raw sewage in about 4 homes. Well, I got called in on one because the IEP that got called, he looked around and he saw that the contractor that was there was way out of their league. So he convinced the gal from the city to call me in. Long story short, I wasn't there for very long when the head honcho from the city came in. He didn't want to hear anything I had to do. Well, bless your heart, honey, ain't it just the sweetest thing that you would come in here and help us? But we got it. First job I ever got fired off of, right? So I left, went and got the copies of the Standard at the time. We had the blue pages, made copies of the sewage, took it back to him, gave it to him. I said, whoever you have do this job, make sure they follow these. These are the minimum standards, not the maximum, but these are the minimum standards. So at least have them follow these. By the way, the young man that was there had Walmart boots, Walmart bags for boots duct taped to his jeans and a paper mask. So why did the IEP think they were out of their league, right? So anyway, the IEP got kicked off maybe 20 minutes after I got fired because they didn't like what they heard. About 1.5 years later, I got a phone call from the lawyer for the insurance company for the insured. Now, the man who lived there was a kidney transplant patient. So I never met him. I met his wife, but never met him because he was long gone out of that house, right? They had put $400,000 into a house that was valued at $250,000. Then when the job was all done, they called an IEP out of Atlanta. They came in, they did the testing, and they found E. coli. And you know, when they find E. coli, they don't say it's in the northwest corner of the bedroom. It's airborne. Where is it? So now this whole house has been reconstructed and it's uninhabitable. Nobody, they can't sell it. They can't rent it. They certainly can't live there. It's uninhabitable. Come to find out, there had been 5 different companies that had been fired off, another one come in. That one get fired off, another one come in. And when the house was all done, now they find the E. coli. So I was teaching a water damage class in South Georgia the week before I was to do this deposition, and I was mentioning this job, and unbelievable. But one of the guys in the class raised his hand. He asked, "Are we talking about, how do you know this?" He said, "I'm the last company that put it together." So I said, "We'll talk at lunch." So I said, "How did you rebuild this house?" Well, first of all, I said, what did the clearance, who did your clearance testing?" He said, "Well, I didn't have a clearance test." You didn't have a clearance. Why? I told the adjuster I needed to have a clearance, and the adjuster said, "Don't worry about it. It's taken care of." I said, "Terrific. So then you said you won't mind sending me a copy of that report, right? For my records?" "No, well, I didn't want to indicate to him I didn't trust him, he was lying." Well, he was lying. Obviously, there was no clearance. So all of those 5 contractors were getting sued because the insurance company the lawyer for the insurance company, she was suing to get the insurance company's money back. So everybody that touched that house was in the lawsuit, except for me. They hired me as the expert witness. So I'm the only one that got to get out of jail free card for that one, right? So the thing of it is, guys, when there is an extensive amount of sewage, or there's somebody who is susceptible, like that man, kidney transplant patient, children, daycare centers, or people who are going to live in that environment or work in that environment. So that just narrows that right down, doesn't it? If there's sewage, don't rebuild without a clearance test. You can't see bacteria. You can't see E. coli. And unless there's a lot of it, you can't smell it. So if there's sewage, please take that very seriously.
Interesting story and sad story at the same time, but
Yes.
happens. Sure. Jeremy, did you have anything to share on that?
Well, I mean, there's a ton of stories, but I think what we have to keep in mind as a restoration professional is that whatever job you're working on is the most important story for that customer, and because they're going to be living in it, they're going to be occupying it. I tell my guys at our office and in our classes, I don't ever worry about getting sued. I'm going to get sued at some point. It's just an exposure thing. What I'm concerned about is doing the right job every day. And so if you focus on that, and there's a measure of trust the customer has placed in you, when you say it's done, they, for the most part, like, yeah, sure, it must be done. You better live up to that. So that's where getting the right education, following the standards, as Sandy had mentioned, is going to be able to produce the end result that customer is looking for.
Mm-hmm. And John, how about you? I don't think you've been sued yet, have you?
I personally have not been sued. A restoration company has, like Jeremy said, it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only thing, I don't really have too much to add other than I just wanted to make this point that you can have multiple categories on one loss. So just because the source is the supply line under the kitchen sink doesn't necessarily mean that everything where the water went is not contaminated. I did have one horror story. I did a job with just that. It was a supply line under the kitchen sink, first floor, went down in the basement. As I was walking down the steps to go inspect the basement, the homeowner said, "Can you wait until I get the dogs out?" I said, "Sure." So I waited. Well, they keep their dogs in a room in the basement, and I don't think they ever went outside. It was pretty disgusting. So while the majority of the rest of that house was a category 1 water loss, that room was pretty nasty. Definitely cat 3.
When he's talking about multiple categories in the same loss, I always get on my soapbox here and I say the way we are teaching and being taught to me is backwards, because when we categorize the job, there's only one place on everybody's paperwork for category. And that's not correct, because the category of the source, like John says, may very well not be the category of the loss. And we're not treating the water that came out of the pipe. We're treating the water and making decisions about the water that's on the floor. And unless our paperwork indicates that the source of the loss is different than, or the category of the source is different than the category of the loss, there's nothing that indicates on our paperwork why we're doing what we're doing. So if there was one thing that I could change on everybody's paperwork, would be having 2 places for category. What's the category of the source? What's the category of the loss? The water we're actually treating. So thank you, John, for bringing that out, because that is a, I don't know if I want to call it pet peeve or heartburn, but that's something that I would really like to see changed, blanket changed in our industry.
That seems like such a smart, simple thing to do.
It does, but nobody does it. And I've never had a student say, oh, that's how we do. Because I ask them, do you have 2 places for category? No, it just, and how do you determine what the category is? How do you determine on your paperwork what this job is? Well, where did it come from? And I hear that from every single student. So there may be some rogues out there like me who are doing that. But for the greater part, no, they've only got 1 place for category, and that's not right. That's not, that doesn't tell the story.
Yeah. Well, thank you for adding that. Jeremy, let's go to you on this next point, because I want to kind of turn the tables here a little bit. Homeowners, when they have a flood in their home, they don't know this information. They don't know these categories. They don't have the IICRC publications to help them. But their viewpoint is definitely theirs, and they have opinions. When a restoration professional deals with the customer in the home, how can the customer's viewpoint impact the work? And how does that affect the professional's approach to the job? Can you talk about that?
So much of when we are not aware, and it's okay. We know homeowners, property owners they're not educated in this particular matter according to the standards. And that's a lot of professionals that aren't, but they're going to use what they see. So they look at it and go, yeah, you know what, it doesn't look too bad, right? And so they may assume it's not too bad. We don't need to do all this. We don't need to cut the carpet out. We don't need to cut the highly porous materials out. So they're going to base it off of that, or perhaps odor. Or on the other hand, they're going to look at what's really a category 1 loss and feel concern that everything has to be torn out or it's not going to be right. So you get these 2 extremes that can happen on a project. And as the professional, you got to navigate that. You can't just shut down what they're saying, because that's their reality. But sometimes it's better to go back to the standard again. You just have to look at each project, each individual a little differently, and help them to see, look, what you want is what I want, a clean and dry property where you can come back and everything's great. But sometimes that includes taking things out in a level of cleaning that you're not anticipating. On the other hand, it may be a lot less than you think is necessary. But that's what makes the standards from IICRC so valuable, is that it gives us a third party that's not at all partial to this particular project. and helps us to see what's going to make that property safe for the occupants. And also, it helps protect the professional in the respect that if something needs to be done, we can see exactly what's going to guide us to that finished product of a safe place for these occupants. So again, there's probably a lot more that could be said about that, but just what comes to mind when you ask that question.
Yeah, good points. John, anything to add to that?
I mean, I think Jeremy pretty much nailed that one. It's about education to the customer also, because they don't know. So when they ask a question, why can't we save the carpet, or you're not going to rip everything out? That's when we go back to the S500 and kind of educate. These are the reasons why we need to do these steps or why we don't need to do these steps. And then if there's a question after that, if they just refuse, then we get into waivers or we walk, because if we can't do the steps that we need to do to abide by the standards, then maybe we don't do that job.
What I'm hearing is that everyone should have a copy of the S500 standard.
For sure.
All right. There it is again. Jeremy's got it. Thank you, John, for that. Before we move on, Sandy, anything to add to what has been commented on that?
Thank you. Yeah, there was a mention of a waiver. The thing of it is, if we know something should not be done, in other words, it's an obvious Cat 3, it is ground surface water, for instance, we know that's a Cat 3. Homeowner does not want that carpet torn out. The water looks clear, it doesn't smell, no reason to tear that out. This is new carpet. My insurance isn't going to pay for it. Clean it, spray it with your foo-foo juice and be gone. If we have them sign a waiver, it's not worth the paper it's written on. Because if somebody was to get sick after we did that, the courts feel we're the professional. We know what needs to be done. And the very fact that we were willing to do less than what the standard says, that in itself is speaking loudly to the homeowner, it's not really that important. Because if it was really that important, I would not do it. So where waivers come into play sometimes, we need to think long and hard before we allow ourselves to do any procedure that is contrary to the standard, because the courts will not be on our side if we get sued afterward.
You know, there might be some watching this program who are homeowners who've gone through a loss, or they might watch this program and then they might have a flood in their home. Are there situations when they can just handle it themselves, or do you three recommend always call the professional? Who would like to handle that one? Jeremy?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's times when you can handle a flood on your own. I mean, I think there's properties where they probably shouldn't have been the building shouldn't have been built where it was at. And every time there's a heavy rain, there's water comes in and you got concrete materials downstairs and you want to wash it out, squeegee it out, whatever. There's a possibility. The challenge comes in where you get complex assemblies. So, we look at the there's drywall, there's paint. Okay, well, it does, no, it's what's behind that. It's difficult, even with specialty equipment and specialty meters and the education and experience that goes along with that, to get that dry. The challenge comes in where you're just left with, even if I went into a project and I didn't have my meters, for example, I'm just going to have to how is it dry? I have no idea, right? We leave this water behind, or worse, possibly contamination behind. It's unknown, and the problem becomes worse. So if it's something simple, you don't have any flooring assemblies. When I say that, of multiple layers of materials, you don't have any wall assemblies, concrete block and concrete floor squeegee it out. I don't think that's as big a problem. But if you're in a finished portion of the house, that's pretty tricky. I don't know how you would be able to, with any degree of success, be able to handle that on your own.
Well, I think that as a homeowner or a property owner, if it's not covered by insurance, they might default to that. I can take care of this. Have you?
Yeah. So here's what I would say. If you're going to do that, cut out everything other than the framing that got wet and leave it alone. Wash it good and leave it alone for a period of time. You know, you're going to have to get that dried before you start rebuilding. The challenge is that often that costs more than just remediating or restoring it, having a professional restore it. You might want to weigh the options before you just jump in and go, you know what, I'm going to do it. But to leave all those materials in place and hope that it dries, that can cause a lot more problems. It would be sort of like if you didn't know how to repair a car and you're like, you know what, I'll give the brakes a shot. Maybe you get it and maybe the brakes go out the next time you go. You just don't know. It's just, and that's the problem, is the unknown is what's going to end up causing you the challenges.
They say hope is not a strategy.
No, but it is a motivator.
It is. Yeah. John, anything to add to that?
Just the safety aspect. So you see on the news all the time when we have flooding and you got the people out in the street and they're wading through all the flood water. That's, according to the S500, that's Cat 3 water. That's category 3. So if that's in your basement, that's also category 3. So as Jeremy said, yes, I mean, you can cut everything out, but you should probably be wearing PPE and you should probably have the appropriate antimicrobials afterwards to make sure that you're bringing that back to a clean situation.
Thank you, John. And Sandy, Jeremy, do you have more?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. John's exactly right. If we're talking about flood waters that have come like rising water, totally different. I wasn't talking about that. I'm talking about, a relatively clean water where we had a clean water break. So if you had river water come into your home, that was not what I was talking about.
Mhm.
John is 100% correct.
Yeah, I
The
think there's a
water
difference from
table.
river water than the gutter of my house, maybe fresh
story.
water. Yeah. Good points. Sandy, get ready for this question. So you talked about how a consumer homeowner might not want to replace items because there's no insurance. That makes sense. Can you just clean it up, suck out the water? I don't have the money. How do the categories of water and the professional assessment of that impact insurance claims? Can you start us off on that?
Yeah, if the Cat 3 is as sewage, insurance companies can deny that based on the terminology that's used. It's more involved than maybe what we want to get into. There's a difference between a fill up and a backup. There's a difference between sudden and accidental water intrusion that also contains sewage than a sewage backup. So a lot is how the wording is as to whether or not the insurance company will pay for it. And most of us will just automatically, if sewage comes into the house, we'll just say it's a sewage backup. Well, if they don't have a sewage rider, they're up that same creek and they still don't have a paddle. But if it's a sudden intrusion of water that also contains sewage, then that is covered. So it's in the terminology. And that is something that, Doug and I have talked about putting on a little school about terminology. How do we advise the homeowners when they're talking to the insurance adjusters? Because that can make a difference in whether it's covered. We had one, it was in Dalton too, where this beautiful, beautiful home. He owned one of the large factories there in Dalton, and he had sewage come into his finished, quote, basement. This basement, people would give their eye teeth to live in this basement. That's how beautiful it was, with a hand carved bar that, get the idea. And so I asked him, I said, have you checked with your insurance company about coverage? And he said, yeah, I called my agent. He told me I didn't have a sewage rider. And I'm thinking, why not? It's less money than you spend at McDonald's on coffee a year, right? Why do you not? But I didn't say it. And by the way, the agent, the guy had his house, his business, his fleet of trucks, he had all of his vehicles, his yacht, and his motorhome, all insured with the same agent. I would have been in there with a straw sucking it up myself if I was that agent, but there you go. So I said, so he told you there was no coverage. Do we know where it came from? And he looked at me. He didn't want to deal with it anymore. He said, the sewer. I said, yeah, I get that. But what I should have asked was, do we know why it came into your house? I didn't ask it right. Sorry. He said, oh, yeah, well, my pipe broke I said, where? He said, about 1.5 feet outside the house. I said, have we got any documentation on that? He said, yeah, Roto-Rooter was here and he found the broken pipe. I've got some pictures. I said, terrific. So is there any root damage? No roots. And okay, so it wasn't the city's line, it was your line. He said, yeah, it was my line. What are you getting at? I said, would you make one more call for me? Would you call your agent back and ask him if the sewage came into my house because of a break in my line? Do I have coverage? I have water and sewage that came into my house because my pipe broke. Do I have coverage? The agent says to him, I can hear him on the phone, I don't know how many ways I can tell you this. I am so sorry, but you do not have a sewage rider, so you don't have coverage. So the guy looks at me and he's had it up to here by that time. I said, would you make one more call? Who do you want me to call now? I said, would you call your main insurance company? Call the head insurance, ask to speak to a claims rep. And don't use the word sewage backup. Just tell them my pipe broke coming out of my house, which caused water with sewage to come in. Do I have coverage? So the little girl on the other end of the line says, I don't know, sir, but I'll find out and call you back. Well, she did about 15 minutes later. And I couldn't hear what she was saying, but he said, no, not the city's line, my pipe. Yeah, my pipe, about 1.5 feet. Yeah, Roto-Rooter was here. I've got pictures. No kidding, he said. And he hung up. And I said, you've got coverage, don't you? He said, yes. I said, I accept tips. So he had a $5,000 deductible. That's what it cost him for that water damage that also had sewage in it. The renovation was over 50 grand. So he would have had to have paid, and he was willing to pay the 50 grand to take care of his house. It ended up costing him 5,000 simply because of knowing what questions to ask, simply because of knowing how these policies are written. Many times we know better than the agents, and that just blows me away, because we do see e-training for agents, and it's amazing how little many of them, some of them are Johnny on the spot, they got it, but so many of the agents don't know enough to lead their insureds in the right direction. and they need us to help. I will add here for any restoration contractors that are listening to this, please don't ever say, even if you know in your heart of hearts it is covered, please don't say, oh, I'm pretty sure this is covered. You can give them questions to ask the reps, but once you make that statement, oh, I think it's covered because of, you may very well end up paying for the restoration yourself. So be careful of our wording.
Good advice. And you were quite the pestering person there when it came to those questions, but your
Oh,
client
yeah.
valued that, I'm sure. Yes.
He was just, he had it.
Yeah.
He didn't want to deal with it. And here I am saying, would you make one more call?
Yeah. And it paid off. So good story there as well. Well, we're about out of time. Let's do some closing thoughts, maybe just what you would like the industry to do with what we've talked about today. John, let's start with you. What are your final thoughts?
I think safety is my biggest thing. When Jeremy talked about it a little bit at the beginning, and so did Sandy, about how category 2 is a category 3. It comes down to safety. Can people live in there safely? Can our employees work in there safely? That's what we need to think about. And you mentioned the S500. I'll put a plug in for the IICRC standard subscription. If you're a restoration company, it's totally worth it. Then you get them all. Because we're just talking about one right now.
Very true. Very true. Jeremy, how about you? Final words of advice.
If I'm talking to restorers, I'm going to go a different direction with it. And that is that we talked about potentially having a different category of loss than the category of the source. So here's something that I will recommend to you. You may feel completely confident that we start out with a clean water category 1 supply source. But now I feel it's category 2 for this reason. And you may be completely confident with it. You can set yourself up for some trouble, or category 3, doesn't matter. You can set yourself up for some trouble if you just go on ahead and start processing the project with that in mind. If it's a small area in our company, well, we're just going to do it. It's not a big deal. It's not a huge risk. But you start getting into, entire floor of a house or some large area. Now, what you've done is you've gone forward with category 2 or category 3 processing, and we get to the end, the adjuster does not agree. So I recommend that anytime you get into that situation where you got a category 1 source, but you're calling it category 2 or category 3 for the reasons in the standard, before you get too deep, get agreement on that. I don't say ask for permission, but get agreement, because here's the thing. A phone call now, when the house is wet and dirty, it's a lot better conversation to have than we've done all the work and now we want to get paid. I don't think it was category 2. Holy cow, you're in trouble. Make the call early, get agreement, and if you can't get agreement, you tell the customer what they owe or you walk away. But you're not so deep into this project, it can be a nightmare. Trust me, you just don't need that. So just that's one piece of advice I give to restorers before you get too deep into those clean water source, contaminated loss.
Good advice, Jeremy. Thank you. Sandy, final word from you. What do you got for us?
Well, very much the same. Just make sure we've got all of our I's dotted and our T's crossed. Any decisions that we make out in the field, we better have a reason for it. Why are we calling this a Cat 2? Why are we calling this a Cat 1 or a Cat 3? Not just because of how it looks or what we think. So we better have some documented proof that we can use to stand behind why we do what we're doing. And when Jeremy says come up with a meeting of the minds at the beginning of the job, that should hold true with every single loss we do, whether it's a small one, whether it's a large one. I always use the expression that satisfaction is based on expectation. And if we don't set our customers' expectations, they will set them. So they won't be reasonable because they don't have the knowledge we have. So it's up to us to set their expectations as to what they can expect and why they can expect it. And then that's their opportunity to say yay or nay. And so we know where we stand at that point. Sometimes it's real tough to get a hold of an adjuster at the beginning of a job. And when we're talking about water loss, we can't really wait on an adjuster because water's not our enemy, time is. And so that does many times push us to start the job, get it rolling before the adjuster's ever seen it. But on the other hand, we don't ever start a job without the homeowner. And legally, they are our customer anyway. So, like Jeremy said, any job we have, whether it be small or large, we need to be on the same page before we get started.
And maybe that page is in that book Jeremy has there in front of him. What's that, Jeremy? There it is. Everyone watching this program, get your standard today from the IICRC and do the job right. Thank you all for your time.